One of the really neat features that comes with Pantheon is multi-dev. So let's talk about branching and multi-dev. So in this lesson, we're going to explain what the multi-dev feature is and how that works briefly as an overview. We'll talk about the benefits and why you might want to use this feature. And then we're going to explain some of the terminology that is associated with multi-dev. So what is it? Multi-dev is the ability for you to fork an entire development site, do your development work in that sort of isolated environment, and then merge your code changes back into the main development site that everybody else is using for development. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, the reason that this is really useful, it's standardized sort of best practices for managing and merging code. Each developer has their own environment. They have their own site that is running all of the same things from the code base that you forked. It has the database, it has the files, and you have an actual working site that they can use without having to set anything up locally. And this keeps it very standardized. It also means everything's running on the same software. So the site is identical to, say, what the live site is being hosted on as well. So everybody has the identical environment. And sometimes when you have local development work, you end up with things being a little bit different on this person's laptop versus that person's desktop, and that can end up creating some problems. This way you have everything is the same for all developers, regardless of what they're working on. So now if we look at this in relation to sort of the standard Pantheon workflow, right? You get 3 environments. You get dev, test, and live. And normally you would just do your work and save your changes to dev, and then you can push it forward, right? So you have that one dev environment site where you can break things and mess things up and play with it. With multi-dev, you have that same system in place. You still have dev, test, and live. In addition, you can have a whole bunch of environments that are all getting merged into that one dev environment. So instead of being stuck with that one dev site, you can actually have a whole bunch of different dev sites, and each dev site can be focused on its own task. You don't need to be mixing and mashing everything together, stepping on each other's toes while trying to get work done. I'm going to do a brief review of terminology. A lot of the terminology that you'll see in multi-dev is directly based on the terminology in Git, because that's what's going on in terms of the code base, which is what's really being worked on here. So we're just going to briefly cover these terms just so that everybody's on the same page with these. So environment is what you get, your environments that you get with Pantheon. So that is the code, the database, the files. It's the whole thing. It's the living, running site. And in Pantheon, by default, you always get a dev, a test, and a live environment. In the code side of things, in the development world, this is normally forking is copying the source code so you can then modify it and start doing what you want with that code. With Pantheon, when you fork an environment, you're basically creating an exact copy of that environment, including the files in the database, not just the code. You have an entire working site with a fork. So branches and commits. So a commit is simply recording a snapshot in time of your code to a history. It's keeping track of all of the changes that you have been making to your code. So if we look at this very simple diagram, right, we have one commit at the beginning, and then we follow along the line. I do a bunch of code, I'm making changes, and then I want to save the work that I've done, and I commit that, and that's number 2. And you just keep doing that. So it's just the snapshot of essentially when you specifically say, okay, I'm done with this set of work, and I want to get a snapshot of this point in time right now. So these are the commits. Now, a branch is a movable pointer to a set of commits. It's a very fancy definition here. The important thing here is it allows independent development in history. Essentially what this is when you have a history, when you have this timeline of commits, one set of that is a branch, right? So it's a bunch of different commits that has the entire sort of timeline of the code changes that you've been making. Now, master is the name of the default branch. So when you first create something in Git, or when you first create a new environment in Pantheon, the code base starts off with its first branch, and that first default branch is always referred to as master. So when you see master, that is sort of the main code base that you start with when you get going. So now you can see what I've done in this diagram is we had the master branch, but what I did is I made an additional branch from master. I basically copied master. I created a new branch called bugfix 232 for ticket 232. And now I can start to begin to work independently in this bug fix branch and not make any mistakes or mess things up in that master branch. So now I have my own code base and I'm not messing with things that are happening in master, and you can create as many branches as you want. Now, if you're moving along and you're working on your code, so in this example, right, so we have a master. Master has 2 commits here, M1, M2, and then I'm creating a branch. So let's say I'm creating a bug fix branch here with that, and this is my first commit, B1, in this new branch that I've created. And I'm working along, I'm changing things, I'm fixing it. I fixed the bug, but now that I fixed the bug, I'm in my own isolated environment. How do I get my stuff back to master, which is where it belongs? And this is what we call merging. So after I've done my changes in my branch, I'm going to merge all of that back into master, and then that would be yet another commit here, M3 on the master branch, and so forth and so on. I could continue to work in this branch if I wanted to, or I could decide to just close the branch because its work is done now. You can go either way there. Another important thing to understand with merging is that merging is between branches. It has nothing necessarily to do with master versus, bug fix branch versus feature branch. You can merge any branch with any other branch, and often you will need to merge changes that have happened in master back into your development branches to make sure you're staying up to date. So that's essentially what's going on in terms of having branches and merging them back together again. So that's the terminology that you're going to be seeing when working with Multidev. Now, just to kind of close things out, I wanted to give a little snapshot, a little glimpse at the Multidev sort of management, like what's going on. So we're creating these environments, these total websites over here, and there's Git code happening in the background. You get this dashboard here that gives you a nice overview of everything that's going on with Multidev. So in this instance, I have a list of all of the different development environments that are currently going on with this particular site. I could also look at just the Git branches. Git branching, you could also still do that, but you wouldn't have an entire site. The environments is the entire website with the database and the files and everything that goes with it, which is what makes it handy. And you can see I have some interfaces here for merging and keeping track of like how many commits we have and where things are in relation to master. And so to recap, we explained briefly what Multidev is, we talked about some of the benefits of it, and we went through the basic terminology, which is really Git terminology. And then we took a little look at the actual dashboard that you get, which we'll be looking at in more detail in another lesson.